Elle, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, I'm really happy to be here. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I was just thinking about our interview this morning and going, okay, well, hopefully I learned something so I can take this back and we can have our money date this week as planned.
Hmm.
We have our money dates usually at least once a quarter. They're always scheduled
Hmm.
once a quarter, but it usually comes up in conversation almost every single week. So I'm going, okay,
Hmm.
I got to pull something out of Elle here to make this conversation just that much better this week.
Oh, that'd be great. We actually look forward to money dates, and I know we'll probably talk about this a little bit more, but it's not pulling out the spreadsheet. It actually is a date and enjoying yourselves and getting to know one another and check in with one another.
Well, I have a bad habit of pulling out that spreadsheet from time to
Oh,
time, but the good thing is she loves seeing it. So we're lucky in
good.
the way that we've been kind
Hmm.
of weird with money since we first met, or at least I was, and I was able to get her on board with my money weirdness. So it's been great for us. But we have so many couples that we work with that
Hmm.
struggle. They're transitioning into retirement, and one has been managing the finances for their entire
Hmm.
lives. And now they both need to get on the same page as they transition into a new timeline that has everything to do with
Yeah.
money. And they're on a fixed income now. It's a lot different. They're really starting to drill down on what those financial goals are. They have to make some big decisions. And sometimes this is just a real struggle. So with that, I thought about getting into, why you started your blog off the top of our conversation, but we had a fan question come in,
Oh,
and
good.
this is one that's always just top of mind for
Hmm.
me. And I'm always trying to figure out what we can do to overcome this issue because I see it so often. So I'm sure you'll have a great answer. We'll have a great conversation around this question from Raymond Zajka. And I may have butchered that last name, but Raymond sent us his question as he is a
Hmm.
weekend reading subscriber. So if you signed up for a weekend reading email that goes out every Friday, you always have an opportunity to preempt these conversations with our guests. So go to retirewithpurpose.com to sign up for that. And you can be just like Raymond here, who said, my wife is not interested in finance. All she really cares about is that the money is available when she needs it. How do I get her to be more interested in managing our money?
Wow. Okay. So just a heads up, we started Couple Money because we needed this. And this is something that we've dealt with um, both ways with my husband and I, our levels of interest and hitting these goals. So it sounds counterintuitive, especially when you're talking about personal finance and knocking out those goals. But one of the first steps I recommend with couples is sitting down, away the numbers, and actually start talking about what would you like to do if money wasn't an issue. What you're trying to do is persuade your spouse, but the first step is to find that motivating factor. What drives them, to get up each morning? What would they like to do if you guys already had that money in the bank? Everything's in the accounts, everything's squared away. How would you spend your days? And that was actually a mistake my husband and I did the first time. We did the whole rip off the Band-Aid and look at the numbers. We survived it, and I'm glad we had that honest discussion. But if I had to redo it, that's the first step. And I've worked with a lot of couples and hearing from them, that was a significant win, which was we go around with these very general goals. I want to retire, or, I want to save this amount. I want to buy a house, like step by step, but we haven't defined exactly what it is and why it's meaningful. So I believe the first thing couples should do is sit down, talk, have a date, and see, where's your spouse at? What really motivates and drives them? Because you may be surprised. It's happened a few times in my community where the spouse is like, I didn't know that's what you wanted to do.
Well, I see it. I think where the problem is
Mhm.
happening with some of the couples that we meet, it usually seems like it's an engineer type, maybe husband usually. It's sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes the
Mhm.
husband's a disinterested party, but quite often, it's the one that's just super numbers driven, has all these spreadsheets, and they want the spouse, their wife, to come in there and get into those numbers with them. Come
Mhm.
in, meet with a financial advisor, and we want you to understand all of these numbers. And the we have to understand the different types of communication, right? Somebody's
Yeah.
right brain, somebody's left brain. And maybe that is where we're going wrong, where we're saying, hey, I want you to meet with my financial advisor first. Or really, it's our financial advisor. You've never met him.
Yeah.
I want you to come in and meet with our financial advisor. And that is what I usually hear is it's a really intimidating conversation. They're intimidated and not interested in the money. Do we have to
Mhm.
go to the source of why they don't want to have that conversation? And I guess if we do want to go to that point and ask them those questions of why they don't want to have the conversation, how do we do it without being confrontational?
Well, I think it's hard. I do believe we need to get to the root of the matter, but I think that is the biggest mistake we kind of make. Like, well, why aren't you interested? This is our finances. This is our future. And instead, that's why I say, like, start with the goals. That's non-confrontational. That's something positive. And sometimes the best thing you can do is model that. Say, in a few years, I'd like to pivot my career. I'm thinking of, either on the side doing some business, or maybe I want to get into real estate investing in the next 5, 10 years, where you're sharing what you want to do and why. Some surprises that people have brought up to me, they didn't realize that their spouse wanted to still work but have more time with the kids, which meant that entrepreneurship, or at least having the finances so they could negotiate with their boss for a more flexible schedule, was their motivation. Other times it had been taking care of loved ones. They have extended family, and they either a cultural or just a personal obligation they felt like they want to support that family member at least somewhat, or to help out somehow. And so that was their motivation to get interested in the finances. Well, how can we square this away? And so instead of saying, why aren't you interested? Find out, if we could, in an ideal situation, create or align our finances a certain way, what it would look to you and why. Because sometimes I think everybody, we follow these goals because we think those are the steps that we have to take. And instead, what we should be doing is defining what our goals are and why it matters to us. And this is something that, even if you're not pursuing financial independence, I think this is one of those pillars of financial independence that they get right, which is define the lifestyle that you want. And I feel like that's a less confrontational way for couples to discuss their finances.
Do we get into the source? Do you find that there is a common source for those individuals that are really avoidant of the financial planning conversation?
There's a couple. One, a lot of us come in with history with our finances, and it could be a model that we've seen growing up with our parents. I've seen a lot of couples deal with the fact that one grew up where there is a scarcity mindset, or they were living paycheck to paycheck. And so certain things like debt was normal for them, and they don't see an escape. I've actually had conversations when we were, for example, like buying a house. You'll always have debt. You'll always have a mortgage, like these small things in the back of our mind that says that it is impossible. Another thing that we could see is where they've seen their parents model, where one, like you had mentioned, maybe takes the lead with finances, but it might be an extreme case where they shut the other spouse out. And so they've never had these discussions. They don't know how finances work. They never had practice within their family, which, as parents, that's something we're aware of now. And we're working with our kids 9 and 5, even on a small scale. So they're more aware of how budgets work, and why you want to have a budget so you can work towards those goals that you want.
I think that's great insight. You have many that have this scarcity mindset, and I see that,
Hmm.
right? It's
Hmm.
just we never have enough. We never have enough. I have a gal that just recently finally got her to
Hmm.
retire, but she didn't need
Yeah.
to be working at all. But she didn't want to
Hmm.
have the conversation because it felt wrong to her because her parents never had enough. And it was really getting to the root of that issue. And you have also just that traditional mentality and just family
Mhm.
structure where, the husband always manages the finances. That's what mom and dad did. Mom didn't have anything to do with it. However, I think there's some real issues with that today. David Bach brought that to us in one of our
Mm.
past conversations, saying, 85% of men are going to die married. Well, who's going to find out that the financial plan that the man put together actually worked out? The woman's going to be the one that's picking up the pieces and actually figures out if the man's plan actually worked out in the first place. And then it kind of comes back to the financial advisor. So when we have someone reach out to us and say, hey, I'm having trouble getting my wife on board. Is there a way that individual, say Raymond
Mhm.
here, could reach out to his financial advisor and prepare them better to have a better conversation to get the spouse on board? What should financial advisors be doing in order to get the buy-in from a disinterested spouse?
Well, I think financial, planners and advisors can be so helpful because sometimes, and this has happened with us, where those initial conversations are a little confrontational, whether you intend to or not, and having that third party who's objective. But the first thing they need to do before you even buy in with like having the plan and the finances and you bring in the advisor, that spouse has to feel like the advisor is working for both of them. And if a spouse feels like that advisor isn't in their corner, they're going to be less likely to go in with the plan. They may drag their feet. I've seen people where their husband, their wife, yeah, I'll do it, but then they sabotage the budget. Or you have,
Yeah.
financial infidelity, those secret purchases here and there. So initially, have the conversation just the two of you. And if needed, I would have the advisor meet with the reluctant spouse to kind of say, hey, listen, before we move
Separately.
in, yes, separately, I know, your husband, your wife is really excited about this plan, but I want to advocate for you as well. This is a partnership. What are some things that you are feeling need to be on the table? What are some discussions we need to have? And I think if an advisor does that, it can start building that relationship because as you know, it really is about the communication between, couples themselves, but then for the advisor, the planner to be a real partner, there has to be that open and honest communication between everybody.
What you said about financial infidelity,
Mhm.
I've seen this firsthand multiple times. There's one
Yeah.
that comes to mind. We received a complaint from a wife last year. So it's about a
Mhm.
year ago. She complained saying that we never followed up with them, never called them, never scheduled an appointment, never gave them regular updates. And I'm confused because we had emailed and spoke with her husband over 100 times in like 6 months,
Mm.
and he had been pushing us to do things that he knew weren't right. And he would tell her that we never followed up. We never, spoke with him. He was trying to sabotage the relationship because he never wanted a financial advisor in the first place. She wanted
Wow.
somebody to help. He didn't want somebody to help. So he sabotaged the whole relationship by making us the bad guy. These things really do happen, whether it's
Oh, they
budgeting or
do.
spending or financial planning structure, or just you have to get buy-in from both spouses. Even more so than that, you've got the statistic that 70% of women will leave their husband's financial advisor when they pass away. It's like, that's probably not what the husband wanted.
Yeah, you don't want to when something that dramatic happens to leave that partner. I'll tell you, I've gotten a lot of emails. So I'm on social media, but of course the nature of marriage and money, no one's going to put their husband or spouse on blast. So I'll get these emails and one of the most common things I get are signs of financial infidelity in the relationship. I remember one in particular was, and it happened to be a husband, that there was a bonus. The team did really well. It wasn't planned like their regular annual bonus. And he was wondering, would it be bad for me to take that money and put it into a secret savings account? Now he claims it would be for both of them without telling his wife because, and in this particular situation, his wife was a spender. And I think we need to acknowledge that a lot of times the money fights that couples have, that we have, isn't really about the money. There is some other issue going on.
Yeah.
And in that case, is it a spending issue for the wife? Then you want to dig in, whether it's the husband or wife. Do they feel like the budget's restrictive? Because in some cases I've seen that where one spouse presents it as, they're always breaking the budget. But then I look at the budget and you know what? It is great in a perfect world where we are robots and we keep to this strict thing, but there was like no room in the budget for things that their spouse enjoyed, and as couples, I talk about this. Yes, you are a team and you want to work your finances together, but you have to have room in your budget for each of you, for your interests.
Yeah.
And, there's so many different ways you can divvy that up. Um, but then getting back into financial infidelity, it is that gray line because are you controlling them through the finances? And see, there's so many things that you can dig up and it's not really about the numbers. There's something else going on
Right.
in the relationship.
Oh yeah, I saw the same thing,
Mhm,
with my parents,
mhm.
and I knew, going into this, before we got married, I said, money is one of the top reasons for divorce. So let's go ahead and check this box immediately. And now
Mhm.
we have the fastest demographic, or the highest rate of increasing divorce in any demographic is baby boomers. And if you're at that point where you're transitioning into retirement, you better knock that one out so that you don't
Yeah.
become a statistic. I want to get into a couple of topics from your book.
Okay.
And this is a good transition because you brought up budgeting.
Mhm.
And in your book, you talk about how to create a budget that both spouses will love. From a high level, how do we do this?
From a high level, you definitely have to address like a budget. What is a budget? A budget is basically giving your finances a plan to get you to where you want to go. And again, defining those goals are important. But then I think a lot of people miss out is the three big buckets of any budget basically are, taking care of the essential bills, um, building wealth, your long-term goals, and then also enjoying now. A lot of times when I see couples, there's a friction between the building wealth for the future and enjoying life now.
Yeah.
And that isn't necessarily a bad thing because we want to find that balance, but there's a lot of tension because we give attention to this side or we're focused on this side and whoever's the quote day-to-day financial person is probably going to skew in one direction, which is I want to build for the future. Um, so I feel like with couples, one of the best budgets just to start off with, if they hadn't been successful or they haven't really discussed a budget, is that 50, 20, 30, not necessarily for the percentages per se, but to get into that mindset of, okay, we have to allocate here, here, and here. How does that look? And then the next step is, well, how have we been doing in the past? And what goes wrong and what I've done and I've seen other couples do is you bring in the budget, right? You're like, okay, last month, this is what you spent money on. Instead of saying, okay, you know what? You went out to eat 3 times a week, for example. We'll pretend it's not 2020. Um, how did you enjoy it? Was that something that you enjoy? Or was that something, you know what, I could cut back on? Again,
Yeah.
I might feel, and I do feel this way, like if you look at our budgets, I eat out more, less frequent, but for me, it's a social. This is how I catch up with friends. I don't necessarily just eat out every day as a routine, but I make appointments. That's what I would do. So that's reflected in the budget. Okay,
Mhm.
this is X amount per month. My husband, he loves tech. He's a software engineer. That's his thing. That's where his money's at. So there's less frequent per year, but they're like huge purchases. But
Mhm.
that's within our budget. But discussing that,
Yeah.
and acknowledging those differences absolutely are key.
Because what's the difference?
Yeah.
Usually someone's
Yeah.
going to look at the budget and go, well, you spent $50 more per week
Mhm.
than you were supposed to last month on this item. Rather
Mhm.
than asking the question about, you know, you spent dollars on these things. Did you enjoy them? Right? Did you have a
Mhm.
good time? You're framing it in a positive light, and I like that. And along those lines, you had I read some
Mhm.
articles out there and discussions you had around joint bank accounts, and I always find this to be a really strange thing to me because I'll meet a couple that's been married for 50 years and their money's been separate for 50 years and
Yeah.
it worked for them. And I always, we've got my sister-in-law just got married and said,
Mhm.
combine the money. Yeah, it's his, and yours, it's it's everyone's,
hmm
so it's going to make it much easier to manage your finances if you have joint bank accounts. I
hmm
just can't imagine being married to my wife and having my own money.
I and everyone's different, and I want to be clear. I feel like one, like you mentioned, it's easier, but then also another consideration is, I'm not saying a spouse pass away, but say if you're incapacitated, example, dealing with COVID, some people are out
Sure.
while they're
Yeah.
recovering, and it's so much easier having one pool. And for us, we do a hybrid. I would say 90% of our money is joint, the day-to-days, the checking, the savings. And we do have money, but just because we have those particular separate accounts does not mean they're secret. So I think that's a big
Right.
difference. With some couples, they feel like separate's my money. I spend it the way I want to. If we needed access to those accounts, we can get access, just
Yeah.
because that's, his fund money that he revs it up till the new graphics card or, the VR system, whatever.
Yep.
Or, if I'm doing some travel trips or whatever, that's still included in our money dates. Like we're still looking at all the numbers together, but we've also, and it does take, a bit of a conversation, compromise, and I hate to say it, like maturity. Like this is the money that we said that you want to spend. I wouldn't spend it that way, but this is what we agreed to,
Yeah, that's what my
and
wife and
let
I
that
always said.
be.
We
Yeah.
also automated it. You talk about automating
Yes.
these things, and we just had everything went into
Mhm,
one joint account, and then we would have, $100 a week goes to you, $100 a week
mhm,
goes to me. So we have, this is ours, and then
mhm.
this is yours, and that's kind of your yours, mine, ours philosophy, right?
Yes.
And you're saying that 90% is ours, and then you have these other percentages that goes to yours and mine. You also
Mhm.
mentioned 50, 20, 30. Was that 50% essential, 20% long-term goals, 30% enjoyment?
Yes.
Uh,
And the 30%, usually because you have two people splitting that, with the ways that you enjoy. And to be honest, like that was a starting point for us, just kind of as a ballpark figure. But as we got to see results and we were getting excited about, building this life, we kind of flipped it. And then, we're around like 45% savings right now,
mhm.
and still enjoying today. But I think just having those buckets kind of, we're all overwhelmed. And like you mentioned, like automation has been a huge win for us because when I'm busy with the kids or work or, something comes up, our money's moving in that direction. And I feel like that's incredibly helpful and speeds things up. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy. And I love the fact that I know that unless I mess things up, like X amount of money is going to joint savings, X amount of money is going to the brokerage account, and it's done. It's
Well, I
kind of
like
that
the
mental weight.
simplicity. I think it's
Yeah.
important to generalize it in a way where we're simplifying it on the front end because one, we just have to get started, but
Mhm,
two, that might be less intimidating for your spouse that's not into the
mhm,
spreadsheets and the exact numbers and the interest rates and the returns. Let's just get this started and then we can slowly get more and more refined and integrated as a couple. So, and one of the
mhm.
ways we might do that is through your money dates that you brought up. I'm wondering, how do you structure that money date and how often are you doing? Is there a real structure? Maybe you're just sitting around and talking about money. And well, what do these look like in practice?
So in general, I gave a framework, and I think naturally with any couple, you just organically it grows and it shifts to like what fits for you. But in general, like a money date for us is, and again, pre-COVID, was we'd go out. We would literally go out, change of scenery, kind of helps mentally sit down and talk about this. And for us, once a month seems to be the best fit, just schedule wise. And we would start out with the wins. What's going well for us? It could be things going well at work, things going well, finances, family, just kind of on a positive note. And then we would review what's been going on, for the last month, what worked, what didn't. And then, we have to have the numbers. It is a money date. And, you said spreadsheet. We use Google
Mhm.
Sheets shared. So before the money
Yeah.
date, I'll just text. It's been updated in case you wanted to check it out. I've also used apps just because I'm usually reviewing them to kind of get a visual way of where everything's going. But then, that's it. It's down to about 5 minutes where we're actually looking at the numbers. It's just making sure the transfers worked out. again, the power of automating, it means we don't have to worry about every penny because every penny is already being moved. And then life happens. So what didn't work? If a kid gets sick, what happened there? What shifted? Make adjustments. And then for the next month, what's going on? Do we have a vacation coming up? I love eating out, finding hole in the wall places wherever we go. Like, where do the locals eat? And so if I know that's happening next month, for example, I'm absolutely cutting back on certain expenses the month before because I really want to enjoy it. And then, of course, I remind every couple is it's still a date. Relax, enjoy it, and have time to just catch up with each other. And, we're parents now of a 5 and 9-year-old. So these money dates are like really a great way for us to relax and, just catch up.
So you said you text your husband and say it's been updated. So I take it you're the one that is managing the spreadsheets. Was he the disinterested party back in 2009 or um,
It was a transformation. So we're not maybe your typical couple. When we came in, I would say I was your traditional spender versus him being a saver. And again, this is things that we grew up with. My mom was a single parent, had 3 kids. So if you can make the payments, you could afford it. Um, and that was kind of my mindset. And my husband grew up kind of a cash based kind of budget. If it's not there, it's not there. You don't go into debt. You don't open a credit card, whatever. And at that time we were college kids, broke college kids, I should add. So we thought this would be the easiest thing in the world to have that conversation. And we immediately saw that we had to change. And it's funny because things shifted as we got excited about where we're going. I wouldn't say either one of us is disinterested. If it was me, I was disinterested in the details at first.
but
But
now you're the
now
spreadsheeter.
now I'm the spreadsheeter. I'm a reformed spender. I call myself a doer. Like I get excited and maybe it's like that joy of like spending, but it's like spending, investing, or we did a renovation of the basement, insulated it, turned it into a home office, excited about that. So yes, it is possible. If anyone's like, how do I get my, spouse on board? It is absolutely possible. And I'm sometimes now like, did you know if we do this, we can just like notch that savings rate up? And he's like, it's okay. We're okay. The kids are going to stay young for not that long. So let's enjoy that. So, you know, it just evolves, it shifts. And looking back, I will say, I'm glad that we've had these money dates and maybe they're not as formal as in my book I laid out, like we go step by step, like a checklist. It's just a conversation. Um, but I feel like it gives us something to look forward to. Like the
Hmm.
finances are no longer the goal. It's just a tool.
Hmm. That's great. Yeah, I'm kind of weird like you. I get excited about the
Mhm.
HSA contribution, the 529
Yes.
contribution at the end of the year. I get really excited and a lot of satisfaction about making that contribution. My wife goes, "Where did the money go?" And
Yeah.
she'd rather have some new furniture in the house,
Yeah.
and that would make me feel sick. Well, that contribution made me feel really good. I
Yeah.
Can you tell us about some conflict that has arisen, maybe for you, or maybe it's not you, it's somebody else, but just how have you had conflict during these money dates? Are there ways that we can avoid potential conflicts?
I would say we constantly are negotiating with each other. I'll put it kindly. Um, Personality wise, if I could create a vacation, I'm the type A person with a vacation. We're going to go A, B, C, D here. Next day we do this. Again, 2 kids in tow can be a bit hectic. If my husband had a decision, it would be like one spot and we just stay there. Like if we go to the mountains, rent a room, rent a cabin, that's it. Like we just stay there. Or the beach house, we're just there. And so I think it's our default where we're negotiating, well, what about this? How do you do this? Our retirement, believe it or not, has definitely shifted. If I had complete control, to be honest, I would be traveling like when we do the full retirement, different locations. My husband, one spot. So how we designed our retirement, and it takes time. Don't feel like it should be one conversation or the big conversation, because I think that's the biggest mistake couples make, is they want to make this the money talk. But we've negotiated where this house in Raleigh, we love the location. It's 5-minute drive downtown. We got this big backyard for the kids. It's a great spot. This is our home base. And so we are going to incorporate more travel. We had uh, before 2020, but this will always be kind of the quote home base for us. And so I think everything's negotiable if you're both honestly willing to hear each other out. You can usually find that third path between what you want and what your spouse wants.
Hmm. Simply listening from a
Mhm.
place to learn and understand rather than listening to be right goes a long ways.
Or yeah, or listening to get like an edge in, like, okay, you said this, so I'm going to turn this to be what I wanted. And then I acknowledge, like, we live in an incredible time where there are more options. Um, with work, we're now all getting a crash course with remote work. How much of it in certain industries is going to stay, we'll see. But, that's opened up opportunities. So again, looking for opportunities and working as a team is absolutely important.
What do you hope the real impact is, the long-term impact is that you're making in the world with the work that you've done over the last decade plus and moving forward?
Wow. Okay. That's a bit deep. Like you mentioned at the beginning, like, finances are a huge source of stress, and in some cases, one of the driving forces of divorce. If I can remove or help a couple remove that, take that off the table so that they can address, their relationship, they can pursue the goals that they want, and they could, really create a life that they love together, I would be satisfied.
That's good. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this area. So I truly appreciate your contributions. I've enjoyed what you've offered on
Oh,
the
thank you.
blog and in your book, and it's made a positive impact into our lives. Before
Mhm.
we wrap up, I'd like to ask you another question along those lines. It might be a
Mhm.
little deep, if that's okay.
Okay. Okay.
What does retire with purpose mean to you?
Retire with purpose means you're not escaping anything. It means you're not like jumping shift from work. It's finding a meaningful and a memorable life. And however that, you know, looks to you, that you're able to pursue it without having this fear of, what's going to happen next with the finances.
That's awesome. Elle, thank you for joining us. If individuals say they want to go a little bit deeper with you, of course, we'll keep the link to Couple Money in the show notes, as well as a link to your book, Jumpstart Your Marriage and Money, Jumpstart Your Marriage and Your Money, a
Yep.
4-week guide to building wealth together. And you have so generously offered to send
Mhm.
out some autographed copies of that
Yeah.
book. You said you're going to send us up a box of these autographed copies, and we'll send them out until they're all gone. If you'd like to claim a copy of Elle's book, all you have to do is write an honest review for the podcast over on
Mhm.
iTunes. That helps us get recognized, helps us get the word out for conversations such as this. You can do that at retirewithpurpose.com. Just click on the podcast tab, and right there it says leave a review, or you can do it on your Apple device. Just go ahead, leave an honest review there, and then send us an email at info@howardbailey.com. That's info@howardbailey.com. And when you do that, say, hey, this is my username, my iTunes username, and this is my review, and we will make sure you get a copy of one of these autographed books, Jumpstart Your Marriage and Your Money by Elle Martinez. Elle, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much, Casey. I hope you have a great day.
You too. Thank you.